today we are going to talk about side quests. The main story of games gets all of the headlines and all of the love and the attention, but actually some of the real depth in games can come from the side quests. When we talked about our open world episode, we talked a lot about endless side quests and the ones where it's just go here, get this, come back and give this to so-and-so, and it can be tedious and boring. So we're not going to talk about those ones today. What I wanted to do was ask you to just share some of the side quests that have really inspired you when you've been gaming, or that you felt have really given an opportunity for a different story to be heard, or for a particular character to suddenly sort of step into the limelight. Have there been any times where you've actually felt that the side quests themselves or a particular side quest has just really maybe shone out a little bit more than the main story itself? So I thought I would share one of mine from Dragon Age Inquisition. And it's the ones where you have to decide the punishment of the various people that you've gathered or collected during the game. So for those who haven't played Dragon Age Inquisition, go and play it. So you go off, you do your quests and things happen and you make decisions about fighting people or bribing people or various other things, political decisions. And sometimes that means that you take certain people into custody. And once you do that, you then get the option to sit in judgment over them and decide what their punishment will be. And this has a knock-on on other aspects of the game. So it's a really fun way to feel like the decisions you're making elsewhere in the game are actually relevant to the game, and that you are actually taking on that ruling role that your character has been given. For me, the sort of sitting in judgment side quests within Dragon Age Inquisition just really gave another layer of depth within the game. So that's the sort of thing that I'm talking about. Do either of you want to pitch in with any of your thoughts on your experiences in side quest world?
It's such a shame how rich and wonderful the original Dragon Age trilogy was compared to the dumpster fire. I can't even remember its name, the latest one that just ruined it and burned it to the ground. Vanguard, yeah. The philosophy of this is a really interesting thing. So it's going to be light and fluffy because we're talking about things we love about games. But it's actually quite an important philosophical part of game design, because the main quest is like the leading actor in a movie or a TV show, and the side quest is the supporting cast, and the main character is enhanced by the surrounding cast, and the gaming environment is the same as that. You can have your main quest, but then if the bits around it aren't very compelling or fun or interesting, it sours the main quest. Whereas when you go, right, I've got the main quest, which is the story they care about the most, so it has to be the best story. So that is, as a given, that's supposed to be the best thing in the game. But then when you apply that same level of quality to the side quests, that's when it elevates, like a rising tide floats all boats, and it elevates the main quest. And basically, like really good games, the side quests feel like main quests. So in things like Dragon Age or Mass Effect or the Fallout games, your companion quests, Baldur's Gate 3, these ones where you can completely skip them. That's what I think of a side quest is. You can completely skip them and finish the game. And when you have something like Astarian's side mission, his backstory, his quest, that's one of the best companion quests I've ever seen, because of the journey that he goes on from when you meet him to where he finishes. And if you can capture something like that over the course of an entire game, one thing that frustrates me about some side missions is when they are locked behind main mission progression. So like in Batman Arkham Knight, you've got Arkham's Most Wanted, and you can do like a bit of them, then you can't do any more until you've progressed a bit further in the story. And that's good for the game and the pacing, but that's still irritating. But yeah, so that's my initial thoughts.
I think that's really interesting, actually, because one of the other things that I was thinking about with regards to quests and side quests is that when you have like a major big deal kind of story going on and you're like, I will go and deal with that, but first I'm going to go over here and help this person with their village, or, you know, something like minor. And it sort of feels a bit incongruous, and it feels a little bit like it impacts the flow of the main story, and it sort of minimizes the relevance, I think, of the smaller quests, because you sort of start feeling like, oh, just got to get these all out of the way. But as you say, Matt, you know, there's also an issue with having these side quests locked behind major quests progress. So I think it's really important to get the balance right so that they complement the main story or give depth to the world that you're in, rather than kind of feeling at odds with it or confusing things.
There is that weird sort of contrast going on between the different levels of quest. And I think when it works really well, it doesn't feel like you're dropping one in favour of another. It all sort of feels like one part of the narrative. And I think one that particularly stands out for me that came into my head as soon as I read the topic for today, and Matt, we have talked about this, and I want to thank you for introducing it to me, it is the Lady Masuko questline from Ghost of Tsushima. You think, oh, it'll only be like 3 missions or whatever, and you're done. But actually it unfolds. You can make it run basically the course of the whole game in terms of the playtime of the main quest. I can't remember if it is sort of locked behind main mission story a little bit, because it does depend on which parts of the map you unlock and where Lady Masuko is and how to get to her. I think the narrative and arc of Lady Masuko's character is something that's really much more in depth than you initially expect, and it goes in directions you don't necessarily associate with the side quest character. It's incredibly emotional and incredibly thought-provoking as a quest line, I think. I don't want to spoil it in case anyone's not played it, but the character I'm talking about, Lady Masuko, is a noblewoman whose family essentially have all been killed by a particular enemy, and she's essentially seeking revenge on the murderer of her family, and or murderers. And as time goes on, you sort of get to understand more about her family, the family that has died, and the person she feels is responsible for that, and how that plays out. But I think what's important in terms of when you talked about side quests perhaps representing characters you don't often see, she's a much older woman. I'd say she's probably in her 40s or 50s, but at the
I would
time
have said
that it's
60s,
set,
70s.
maybe 60s, yeah. I mean, she's quite active and spry.
Yeah, so I think
she's
a critical
warrior.
Sorry, a critical part of that quest is, you're quite right about her age, is the point of her entire family being killed is she's too old to start again.
Yes.
It's again, the philosophy of legacy is, so like something, this is explored in Star Trek with Captain Picard, his family is all killed, and he thinks, oh, should I go back to Earth and restart the family? Otherwise, I'm the last Picard. But then he comes to the conclusion that legacy takes more than one form. It's not just about family ongoing, and it is a rarely explored thing. It's awesomely explored in. Have you seen Bridge on the River Kwai?
But I've heard of it.
Masterpiece, absolute masterpiece. And the British Colonel's he has that exact same quandary, and how you find meaning in your life again when what you thought was your legacy is taken away. And that's the side quest.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But yeah, as Matt was saying, it's a perspective you don't often see, and it explores emotions. Obviously, grief being a chief emotion, but also persistence, determination. She's a very strong character, perhaps to the point of stubbornness, which I think is also explored, whether it's right that she continues on this quest, whether she's actually doing herself and others potentially more harm by seeking revenge, which again is also sort of paralleled in the main quest. So you've kind of got two different sides of it going on as well. But yeah, I just really can't praise it enough. I think it's wonderful.
That's really interesting what both of you have said. I mean, I haven't played it, so, it's things like that inspire me to play these kind of games. I actually wanted to ask you both, because have you both played Witcher 3?
Yes. Yeah. Not all the way through, but I have played it.
When I was looking for this episode, one of the ones that kept coming up on all my research was the Bloody Baron quest line in Witcher 3. And I haven't played Witcher 3, and I tried to start, but I couldn't get past the tutorial. I maybe need to go back and give it another go. So the Bloody Baron quest, I don't know if either of you two want to explain it, or if you know about the backstory.
I remember I think definitely starting it. It's a long time ago, so my memory is hazy, but I can't recall if I've finished it. Definitely remember reading about it in game and possibly starting it, but I feel like it's quite long, so I don't think hours and hours and hours long. Yeah, I think I started but didn't finish, but I don't know, Matt, if you've done that one.
Yeah, it's another. It shares some parallels again with the Ghost of Tsushima Lady Massacre quest that I can't go into because of spoilers. But it could be a game in itself, this quest. It's a little bit problematic. It involves some stuff about abortion that is a bit complex. But the root of it being just the role that domestic violence can play, and actually exploring that and putting the Witcher spin on it of it's leading to monsters and terrifying witches in the woods. And that was EP. But yeah, it is talked about very often as one of the most iconic Witcher quests. So I think this leads me into the narrative-based side quests, because not all side quests are about the story, they're about the loop that you're doing. But the game, a particularly awesome one I've experienced recently, was in Spider-Man 2. There's this fantastic character called Yuri from the first game who's a police officer, and she's Spider-Man's Commissioner Gordon from Batman, and so they're a team. And she's really she's just this badass female cop, but she's got this soft side that lets her identify with Spider-Man. But the DLC missions for the first game suddenly turn very serious because she is going after a mob boss and the mob boss captures her and kills her entire team in front of her. And then the process of those DLCs is her descent away from the system is broken. She doesn't believe in the system anymore, so she becomes a vigilante, and she appears in the second one. And she's now this hyper-violent and kills the criminals that she goes after. And Spider-Man's trying to, like, talk her out of it, but she's certain in her beliefs. And a fantastic line is, she says, "I'd rather lose sleep over the one I killed rather than the ones I didn't save." And you just go, that's a fantastic bit of writing, and makes me that kind of narrative quest where, when it is locked behind story progression, I can't wait for the bit where you can do the next step of that. So, yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, these quests often come from as like a single sentence or something. Apparently, the Bloody Baron story came from a single sentence brief, which was like, Geralt meets a baron who'll trade information for a monster kill. And then it ended up being this like 40-page script and long involved subquest. And I think that there's real value in having these stories that allow you to explore topics that might be awkward in a main story as an entire game themselves, but can be and should be told within the medium of video games. And so having this sort of side quest where you can really explore all of that can give air to a lot of the stories that perhaps we talk about on the pod that we feel should be getting more centre stage in games. Maybe they are, just in these side quests is an easier way for them to put them. Thinking that through, though, do you feel that might mean that side quests are in some way devaluing the topics that they are covering because they are just side quests, because they're not part of the main story, that in some way says these are topics that we shouldn't talk about, we don't really want to talk about, or we've just put them in here as a diversity nod? Or do you feel like that it can undermine things, or do you think that it's actually a really good way of exploring these topics within the game environment?
I can see why you're asking the question, but I think if the quest is particularly well written, as I mentioned when I spoke about Lady Masako, it won't necessarily feel like a lesser quest, so to speak. And I think it will be, if it's compelling enough for you to want to explore it, then that's good enough reason to explore it. You know, that's the key, I think, to any quest, whether it's main or side or whatever. If it compels you, then it's worth exploring and worth talking about, I think. And the key is to capture the attention of the player, which can be tricky to do, but because of often we've discussed how often tropes come up in video games and how common they are, and how rare, well, not necessarily, but it is relatively rare to feel like you're playing a game that isn't based on some kind of, oh, I've seen this before, or oh, this is I'm going to predict how this is going to happen. We can all see how this is going to unfold. And it's a nice surprise when actually those assumptions are challenged and changed and things as well.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's an opportunity to kind of explore those things. But yes, it is also an opportunity for the tropes and things to come up again. One of the other things that came up for me was the side stories in split fiction. So, when you're running through the main storyline, which, without giving too much away, runs between the two protagonists' sort of preferred genre. So you've got one who prefers fantasy and the other one who prefers sci-fi. So you alternate between their two stories through the game. During each one, you're able to then step into a side story that belongs to the other person. So it's sort of like, so in the middle of the fantasy story, you might step into a little sci-fi story or vice versa. And I really liked that, partly because it was a genre break in the middle, partly because I think that it really lent into this idea that it was a split between them. There was this divide in their approach to the world, that these two women who have very different ideas of sort of what is good for writing. And I think it kind of really lent into that. But also because it felt to me like within those side stories was where the games explored a lot of differences and a lot of technically different ways of playing, and gave you an opportunity to play as though you were in a platformer, or to run around as pigs. And there's all sorts of fun stuff that happens. And the stories themselves were very self-contained, and usually supposedly from when they were younger, or specifically related to a very specific event. So it gave you a little bit more depth to the characters. They were optional on each level. But for me, I liked that because the whole game is about, as I said, this distinction, this sort of juxtaposition between the two women and their take on the world, and help to sort of forward their story. But I can also see how that sort of tonal shift between, we're running around in this fantasy world, and then suddenly we're doing an adventure where we're racing on snowboards, or there's this shift. And I don't know, what did you guys feel about that? Did you feel like it was that jarring?
That was where I came and subbed in occasionally when they were struggling, and a couple of times they would be in the side quests. There are ones where the gameplay takes the main compelling thing, because each side quest is like a mini game of a different type. Like there's a snowboarding one, and a Candyland one, and a fabulous one where you're sort of traversing across some giants, and they're sort of carrying you across the environment. And so, yeah, I think Split Fiction's quite unique in that it's jarring because it's completely different game styles. But I really love when a game has such good gameplay that it's just incredibly satisfying doing missions that just involve one aspect of it. So in Assassin's Creed Syndicate, the fight clubs, I went through all of the fight clubs. It was so satisfying. The combat was so satisfying. I still don't understand what happens when you grab someone by the face and sort of rub their face down. I've no idea what that's meant to do. And then there's finding all the leaps of faith in Assassin's Creed. A big one in the Valkyries from God of War. Just those boss battles were incredible. The story is secondary. It's the gameplay that is the core of it. So that's another role that side missions can play.
Really. I was going to bring up the Valkyries actually as well, Matt. But in terms of Split Fiction, I really, really enjoyed the little side quests. I looked out for them in every main mission. I was like, which one's going to be next? Because each time they're so different to what you've been doing before. It's always such a surprise, and I wanted to know, what's it going to be this time? What's going to happen this time? What kind of game are we going to play? What kind of world are we going to be in? It was a very clever narrative device also, because it was as if they were exploring little snippets of childhood trauma, which is an interesting thing to think about, like in terms of, the types of things you talk about in therapy. You'll talk about something that from like when you were 6 that you had no idea was going to come up in the session, but actually means everything and underpins a lot of stuff. When actually all it was about your fear of the dentist, for example. And that dentist boss with his teeth was pretty scary. There's some pretty creepy boss fights in a lot of these. They're all quite dramatic. But yeah, I really loved the way the game showcased all these different gameplay styles. We had sort of side-scrollers, we had bullet hell, all sorts of different things going on. And I think it's a unique space to not only experiment from the developer's point of view, but also from a player who may not necessarily be a hardcore gamer. They can experiment with all these different types of gameplay and be like, oh, I really liked this type of gameplay, or I found this one really challenging. So you kind of get to know, like, oh, what other types of games are like this? So it's a really cool way of exploring that. And then you mentioned the Valkyries, Matt. I think there's a genre of side quest, which is almost like a challenge quest, where you can challenge yourself. It's not necessarily anything to do with progressing the story or the main missions or anything, but it's like a little side something where if you want to do it, you can, or you can leave it. You can come back later and maybe try again. But yeah, the Valkyries were amazing. There's an equivalent to that in Ragnarok. I forget what they're called, but they're like ghostly warriors.
Berserkers.
Berserkers, thank you, Matt. And they were epic fights as well. And the rewards are excellent. I think that's one of the key things about challenge quests is, what do you get at the end of it? How's that going to benefit you through the main quest? And it really is a useful benefit, definitely, without spoiling anything. I really like the options that you have there as well, for sure.
I think there's a lot to be said for being rewarded for stepping off the main path. I've always felt that if I'm in a open world game or semi-open world, that if I make my way all the way up a mountain and round a corner, I want there to be something there for me. I want there to be some sort of reward, because I think you should reward gamers for actually being prepared to kind of explore and get really involved in what's going on in the world. What you were saying, Alex, it just really made me think about the idea of the sort of completionist trap that you can get into, because obviously the beauty of side quests is that they are not compulsory. You don't have to do them to complete the game. So Baldur's Gate 3, as you brought up earlier, Matt, and the Astarion's story was amazing. But I lost Lae'zel very early on because of what happens in this game, which I won't say. And so I didn't do any of her story. So I don't know any of her story. I think Daniel killed Lae'zel instead of rescuing her right at the start. So he never explored her story at all. And so both of us got to the end of Baldur's Gate 3 without ever really finding out Lae'zel's story. And I think that's kind of cool that you can do that you can have a full game and a really enjoyable game without having to do everything. But I am a completionist, and so I can get quite stressed when you've got a lot of side quests to do, and to feel that it's okay not to do these. I can go on with the main story. How do you guys feel about that? How do you manage that balance between those two?
It's difficult because there are some games where like you can do all of the side quests alongside main quests. So you do them as you go along. Well, it's games like Baldur's Gate 3 where you literally can't do everything in one playthrough. There's too much. And then you need to play it multiple times. Like, I'll do a bit and then I'll go back and change my mind. And because I don't always have time to play games all the way through again, you kind of have to play some games all the way through to get a new ending or a new path. So often with things like Baldur's Gate or Dragon Age, I'll reach a point where a certain side quest has been locked off, and I go, well, in order for me to do that and it looked good, I'm going to have to start the entire game again.
Yeah. That's a bit disheartening, isn't it, to do that? Yeah.
I often feel bad about how much I neglect the main quest when I'm playing a big game. Like, for example, I'm playing Ghost of Tsushima at the moment, and I like to spend time just doing as much of the side activities as possible so that I can sort of be as OP as possible in my character, build up the skills, build up the experience, get lots of cool outfits and cool sword sets and different colours, go to different dye houses and get cool green clothes and white clothes and black clothes, etc. And then I'll be like, right, well, there's nothing to do more in this area of the map. I guess I'll do the main quest. But then every time I'm like, oh, we're going to this area. We've already been here once the main quest starts. And I'm like, this would have made more sense if I hadn't done it yet. Yeah. So it's a bit like how much there's definitely a fine balance to doing side and main quests where they overlap each other. And I'm guilty of spending too much time on a side quest as compared to a main quest, definitely.
Oh, I love that. That doesn't surprise me at all, actually, Alex. I know one of your favourite games is A Little to the Left, which is all about tidying up and getting everything nice and neat. So I'm not surprised that you enjoyed to do that. I'm very similar. So I'm just going to wind up now, but I wanted to share one of my favourite side quests that appears in many, many games, and that is fishing. And fishing appears in so many games, and to the point now where if I play a game and it doesn't have fishing in it, I'm kind of shocked and very dismayed. So do you guys have anything similar to that you sort of see comes up in a lot of games, or that you look for, you hope for?
Or just little mini gambling games, sort of stuff like that. And Ghost of Tsushima, there's a coin flicking one, which is really, really addictive and can lose you a lot of money, as I may have mentioned on the pod previously. Just little sort of board gamey games, or like card games like Gwent in The Witcher, stuff like that. Those are quite common nowadays, definitely.
Yeah, definitely those in-game cardboard games are just, when they're not great, you could just ignore them. But then when they're really good, you can sink endless hours just in playing them. One of my favourite ones is Queen's Gambit in Final Fantasy Remake Rebirth. And there are like tournaments, and I love when you'll play your first game and they'll go, oh wow, you really beat me there. You know what? There are three champions of this dotted all around this area. You should go and beat all of them. And when you beat the boss level of this, and that's the loop of those kinds of quests, and how the game works, and then working out how to win, and then winning is very satisfying. Very, very satisfying. And occasionally you'll get one like Gwent, which births an entire other game, which is Thronebreaker. And I've played through that multiple times because it's got the version of the game, of the Gwent, and an incredible narrative that has as many branching paths as The Witcher did. So it's one of those things where it shouldn't exist. It doesn't make sense that it exists, but they pulled it off somehow.
Awesome.
And I have one more honourable mention. One of my absolute biggest things that I love doing have been in Death Stranding 1, which is building roads. There's a roads, the map, and you have to collect metal and ceramics to go and rebuild them all. And if you've brought an area onto the chiral network, which is it's basically like the internet, when you do that, you get access to a load of community. Every player can, when they put like a shelter down or a station or a post box. Once you bring it onto the chiral network, you get access to some of those community created elements. And so when you an area, the community will often have donated a load of materials to each of the roads. So if you go along with the quest, you can collect the materials and build the road fairly simply as you go along. But then when you try, which is what I always want to do, to build the roads far off into the future, the amount of materials just becomes more and more prohibitive. There, you don't have access, because they're not on the chiral network, you don't have access to anyone else's materials. So I end up going back through all of the bases I've been to and getting all the materials I can and then driving them all the way, adding a little bit at the end and then driving all the way back. And Death Stranding 2 made this even better than I didn't think it could get any better, where they've added a monorail. So because it's Australia and there are mines all over Australia, you've got a monorail that goes between the mines and certain cities. So now you can build the road, build the monorail, and you can ride the monorail as if it's a zip line. You can load on the cargo and then ride on top of the cargo. And there's nothing more satisfying than finding out the next main mission is at the far end of this monorail that I built ages ago. So all I need to do is go, oh, this is a massive amount of cargo to be traveling. You'll need to use a lorry to get there. Load all the 500 kilograms of freight onto this, and then I just highlights of side quests.
That's cool. Yeah. Well, unless you've got anything else you want to add, Alex?
No, just that I love a monorail. That's unusual. That's probably the first game I've heard of with a monorail in it. Unless you count The Simpsons Hit and Run.
Of course, the biggest side quest of them all is real life. So we'll let everyone get back to that for a little bit. Thank you both very much. And we're here every Thursday. We're talking games stuff. Equality, diversity, and equity are our watchwords. So, yeah, join us, follow us, share us, and let us know if there's anything you'd like us to talk about, and tell us what your favourite side quests are. So, thank you very much. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed that episode of Gaming the System. If you want to support us, you can donate to us through our PayPal by sending it to wearegamingthesystem@gmail.com if you want to send us a one-off donation. If you want to donate to us monthly, you can subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/gamingthesystem. Until next time, bye-bye.